Before we get to the video, YouTube, in their infinite wisdom, have decided to demonetize this channel for some reason. So if you'd like us to continue producing these videos, and if you're enjoying them, please do follow the link in the description, go over to lotus.com, sign up for £5 a month, support us, so we can keep doing what we're doing. Thanks.
Hello, Ed. I hear you've got a new paper out. Do you want to tell us about that?
I had a new paper out. It's no longer officially out. Yes, the paper is called Do Conservatives Really Have an Advantage in Mental Health? An Examination of Measurement and Variance by myself and Emil Kierkegaard. It was published in the Scandinavian Journal of Psychology, and it was accepted last summer. It's been on the website since, and it's now the ninth most downloaded paper in the journal's history. And what we showed using an earlier paper and their data was that there is a robust relationship of a minus 0.35 between a wokeness scale, a scale of wokeness, and mental health, and that there is a correlation of 0.33 or 0.36 between wokeness and depression. And anxiety, and 0.22 between wokeness and depression. So basically, we showed that woke people are, on average, more mentally ill than controls. And we showed in the paper that it's a genuine relationship. That's what measurement and variance means. So it could be that the fact of being woke means you answer mental health questions differently, for example.
Okay. And did I hear you say conservative people are better looking as well, or did I imagine
that is true? But that's later. That's another paper. That's not this paper.
Oh, okay, right. So woke people are more mentally unwell, yeah. And you mentioned a factor. What was that factor? And for the layman, how big is that?
The correlation. So it was about 0.4. So that's a sort of middling relationship. Okay. It's a strong relationship 0.9 or 1, weak relationship 0.1. This is a middling relationship. So it's a robust relationship. So this was peer reviewed by 2 qualified anonymous peer reviewers. It was accepted for publication. It was put on their website. It got a lot of attention because it finally demonstrated that this relationship really is real. It's not down to measurement error or anything like that, which it could have been. That woke people are on average highly mentally ill. And so that was that. And as I say, it's a lot of it was a very popular paper, 9th most popular in their history. And then suddenly in February, I got a letter from them saying the paper was being retracted by the journal. Because there have been complaints from woke people that the paper was insulting and biased and used pejorative language and was unpleasant about them and things like this. And so it was then sent out to 2 new peer reviewers, who, by the way, knew our names. So that's not anonymous peer review. So that means you can see that if they're left wing, it's obvious what they're going to do. And those peer reviewers asserted, I call it queer review, like a higher level of review than peer review, which is that it has to get past the political commissars. Queer review. A lot of papers on transsexuality pass peer review, but they don't pass queer review. And it was retracted. And when you look at their justifications for retracting it, it's quite extraordinary. The first one was that they questioned some statistical stuff, but that was because of a problem with the paper that we based it on, not with our paper. So we redid the calculations, and we showed that the correlation between wokeness and mental illness was higher if we redid the calculations based on their criticisms. And the second one was lack of they talk about unsupported biological determinism, various things like this, various assertions, but the main thing was judgmental language. The manuscript uses language that is inappropriate for academic writing. Quote, less attractive and higher in neuroticism. What's to describe liberals? Creating a narcissistic, morally superior self to explain liberal coping mechanisms, playing with status covertly via virtue signalling as behaviour attributed to liberals. Well, I've made those statements in other peer-reviewed literature, and there's never been a problem. He says the phrases are subjective, pejorative, and lack empirical support. Such language reflects ideological bias rather than objective scientific analysis, damaging the credibility of. Well, that's rubbish. I could give them many citations. There's just been a paper published on it that liberals are less attractive than conservatives on average. Neuroticism is academic language, and it's a fact that liberals are higher in neuroticism. We prove it. It's a fact that liberals are higher in narcissism. There's a number of papers that have shown that. And it's a fact that playing for status, that virtue signalling is an example of playing for status covertly. So that's why it was withdrawn. That's why it was retracted. That and a load of other little minor things they list. Like they said, oh, you're mixing left wing and wokeism. You're mixing them together. You shouldn't be. Well, what's the difference? There is no difference.
I was going to ask, what is the difference?
There is no. The only difference I can think of is that some left-wing people will claim will be anti-trans, maybe, But that seems to me to be the only significant difference. So it's just minor things. It's the essence of it is left-wing people did not like a paper which proved them to be higher in mental illness. That paper also demonstrated that they were higher in narcissism, or it discussed that they were higher in narcissism. And of course, being narcissistic, they felt a narcissistic rage and got very upset and wanted the paper to have a sense of power back, wanted the paper to be withdrawn. And it's quite brazen, it's quite extraordinary. Woke people don't like paper showing that woke people are higher in mental illness, so they have paper withdrawn on evidently spurious grounds. And the other thing was that I did a discussion where I looked at the possible reasons for the relationship. That's why they've accused me of biological determinism, for the possible reasons for the relationship. And I said, well, this is what I think is the reason. It's that they're higher in mutational load. And here's the evidence for that. And they particularly don't like being told that not only are you mentally ill, but you're genetically defective, which on average they are. Again, that I've said in other peer-reviewed papers that have been published in serious academic journals. This was Scandinavian Journal of Psychology, this one, but in Evolutionary Psychological Science, I've got a paper published in which I argue that, no problem at all. But it's just that this is a much more mainstream journal.
Yeah,
very mainstream.
Well,
journal.
I mean, what you're talking about, I mean, you're doing it scientifically, but I mean, the rest of us can just do it by just looking at these people. Their faces look melted. They just look weird, and it's kind of to the point where you can kind of look at somebody and know what their political opinions are going to be before they ever open their mouth, even if they haven't got pink hair or blue hair or a nose ring or something like that. So it's very observable. But you found. Well, I mean, I guess you found it because it is there and because we can see it. You found it in proper scientific terms.
Yes. So we found it statistically. The data had a woke instrument, a series of questions about your views, and the data they also had the same sample fill in a mental health instrument. And then and quite a large sample, about 6 for the mental health instrument. For both, it was around 1,000 people. I think it was. So it was quite a large sample, and the relationship was clear and robust. And they were high in anxiety. That was the key thing. Anxiety predicts being woke, and to a lesser extent, depression. And that was that. And so we just, as I said, we just read it. But the only reason I put in all this stuff on the biological possibilities, i.e. my argument, was because the peer reviewers told us to. The original peer reviewers. So originally I thought, I'm submitting this to a mainstream journal. I'd better not discuss the based science, because then it might get rejected. And then the peer reviewers, who by chance happen to be relatively based academics, shall we say, said, put in the discussion section in detail your theory as to why this relationship exists. So I did, which I hadn't previously done, and that is why the paper is retracted.
Okay, so I mean, there's a couple of points here. I mean, the first thing is you described it as a mainstream publication a number of times, but I mean, is this a publication that is just known for being particularly left wing or something? Or
I don't know if it's known for being particularly left wing. I suppose you could argue that the default if a publication is not explicitly right wing, essentially, then it is left wing. So
okay. And the second point, which is probably the bigger point, is I mean, obviously this is very irritating if you've done a very successful paper and it's been highly downloaded, and so I get it's irritating on a personal level. Of course, there's a much bigger issue here, isn't there? In the way I understand academia is supposed to work is that people do the science and then it's peer reviewed, and then because it's peer reviewed and published in a proper journal, that is then considered to be part of the scientific knowledge of which we then base future scientific knowledge.
Yeah.
And if something can be rejected on the basis that it upsets woke people, well, I mean, that to me sounds like it's undermining quite a lot.
Yes, it's very, very dangerous, because the peer review it's a relatively new thing. It's really only been going since the 50s.
Oh, really?
Well, because then it used to be the editors would just decide what to publish. I mean, Darwin was never subjected to peer review, nor was Einstein, really. So, but since the rise of photocopying and whatever, you've been able to send these papers out to people and have them peer reviewed, and it's considered the scientific gold standard that it has to go through peer review. And once it goes through peer review, that's it. It's sacrosanct. It's done, and it can only be withdrawn if it's shown that the results are just totally wrong, that there was because of some major error or because of fraud. That's when that's when you withdraw something, because there's been a major mistake, which means that all the results are completely wrong, or because there's been fraud.
But hang on, you just told me that the reason it was withdrawn is because it upset people.
Right, exactly. So then now this has now been completely undermined over the last 10 years or so. We've had papers that are withdrawn not because of that, but just because they don't like them. They don't like them. And then they start talking about a failure of peer review. So instead of saying, okay, I don't like this paper, I'm going to write a response piece and show why it's wrong. That's what you're supposed to do. No, they don't. What they want to attack, basically, people whose ideas they don't like, and to suppress those ideas. And so, in this case, the editor of the journal should have read that paper once it had got through peer review. The editor of the journal read that paper and decided that it was good enough to be sent out for peer review. It was then peer reviewed. He then read that twice. He then read that paper and he had it published. At any point, he could have said, no, this isn't, no. But he didn't. And then only because there was obviously an orchestrated campaign, I don't know, somehow, because it was such a popular paper and they didn't like the idea of those results, i.e. that woke people a higher mental illness, definitely, having the sacredness of scientific blessing placed upon them, as it were, that then they moved into having it removed on grounds which the peer reviewers would have picked up on if they'd been a problem, the original ones, and which they anyway literally asked us to put in. So it's just an example of highly politicized. It's the whole notion. There's other people as well. J. Michael Bailey, who's written a lot on transsexuality and autogynephilic transsexuality, he had a paper forcibly withdrawn due to a minor error, which in any other situation there'd just be a correction. But because it's him and the subject that he's writing on, i.e. autogynephilic transsexuality, the paper is withdrawn. However, the other way round, in our one, there weren't even minor errors. I mean, it was literally just they just came up with.
You say it's because of who he is, but my understanding of the peer review process is they don't tell the peer reviewer who's writing the paper.
Well, but they do with the queer reviewers.
Oh,
so both those queer reviewers knew my name, and so it's obviously not anonymous when it's queer review.
I see. Okay. So yes, I mean worrying on a number of levels. However, let's wrap this up with perhaps a cheerier note. Very annoying for you that the paper's been taken down. Very annoying for all the people who could have learned something from it.
But the paper's still available. So what's going to happen? Available? Yeah. So all that's going to happen?
Where do people get it?
They can find it on ResearchGate for free, or it's still available from the journal's website. It's still there. It just says retraction next to it. I've cited retracted papers, but only when, like for example, J. Michael Bailey's, but only when I know it's been retracted for ridiculous reasons.
Okay, but so the more positive note I wanted to leave us on is it necessarily that bad that that woke people are not spotting their own flaws? And because I mean, you've done another book where you talk about essentially the sort of woke people are kind of removing themselves from the gene pool through their own sort of culmination of factors. I mean, you can explain it better than I can.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think that the fact that this has happened to my paper, I don't work. Okay, I have like honorary professorships, but I don't work within academia, so it doesn't affect me that this has been withdrawn at all. If anything, it's a good thing because it highlights the insanity of the situation. It's so brazenly biased, it's so brazenly political, it's so brazenly anti-science that if anything, it's almost beautiful. I mean, it's as some tabloid journalist might say, you couldn't make it up. But yeah, I suppose it is true that they are gradually removing themselves from the gene pool, and the heritability, despite them not liking that fact of these things, is very high, and it sucks in all but the genetically healthy. So as I've argued in my book Woke Eugenics, how social justice is a mask of social Darwinism, it is a good thing in the end, as you say, that they're not self-aware. Yes.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the channel and updating us on that one. Where can people hear more from you if they like the cut of your jib, sir?
Oh, well, if they do, then it's Jolly Heretic on YouTube. JollyHeretic.com is my Substack, where you can support me if you like. And then I'm at Jolly Heretic on Twitter.
Thank you very much.